What will be the future role of public space be? What are the new policies that public space needs?
For me, since a long time, the definition of public space is a difficult one, because I think when we look at it from the perspective of architecture, it is a little bit too spatial, and we always tend to see it as a constructed place, as something in a very urban context. And so I often tend to just take the space away from the public. And since I also have a background in the arts and followed the work of many artists that have been working in these fields, I find it really important to see what comes out of those directions. So for example, the San Francisco-based artist Amy Balkin has some 10 years ago, pretty much, I think, it was, it was in 2012 at the Documenta in Kassel, proposed the project Public Smog. And that was sort of, I think, the beginning of that project. I'm not perfectly familiar with how it started, but she wanted to raise the issue of our atmosphere, of our air, to be our public rights, just as water and many other givens naturally provided by this planet and now in peril. And this project, Public Smog, has over the years become a very beautiful idea and a very strong idea. And I think we should be talking about these things so much more, because she's actually initiated a park in the atmosphere. For me, space is what we see, what we breathe, water, everything that surrounds us, the environment. Yeah. And for me, especially, in education, I find it very important, especially in the urban context, to understand this. Yeah, that we get away from this sort of brick and cement and asphalt attitude, and understand the balance between these different powers that are important for us as humans. So when I see it in this context of our new way of life, and maybe that is really staying with us much longer than we thought a month ago or 2 months ago, the social distancing, all these issues that we're having now, not meeting friends anymore, things like that. It is really unsettling, and I think we really need to come up with something there. But seriously, public space for me was always a big problem when we only see it in this kind of urban context. Yeah, because I don't think it's very public anymore since a long time. I think there is something that especially comes into the conversations in architecture now from the world of the arts. 10, 20 years ago, we were probably seeing that much more as a different discipline. Yeah. Also, we're much more familiar with what is coming out in science and technology and so on. And in the arts, people are working a lot more with science and technology. And, it's not only us or engineering or something like that. Yeah. But because maybe the approach in the arts is a different one, a more personal and a more intuitive one. Not always, but let's say in the work of artists that I'm following a lot, I think there is really something very interesting happening that probably doesn't get enough public in that sense. Yeah, some of you might know, I've also been following a lot, of course, the work that is just very close to us here in downtown LA. Lohrmann Bond's project for the Los Angeles River, to just really bring that back into the public sort of conscience. Yeah. So that, for example, and then there's a Brazilian artist, Maria Teresa Alves, who has been, throughout her entire life working with communities predominantly on water rights, on environmental issues, first in Brazil when she was still living there, then she for a long time lived in the United States. Right now she's living in Italy, in various places in Europe, Berlin and Naples mostly. Artists are doing together with communities to really raise issues that in politics wouldn't have a chance, but then they sort of come in through the back door. And that is where I really appreciate their work, because they're getting things done that we in architecture approach maybe from a more stiff perspective, because we always have to deal with all these policies and things like that. So then we very quickly run against the wall. But there should be a combination between the two. Yeah. Much more of a connection to what we can really do with the people who are directly in the mess, let's put it like that. Yeah. So now the whole globe is in the mess, and everybody's sort of waiting for our governments to come up with a fantastic solution. The only solution that there is, we think, is a vaccine. But I think we can also do something as the people, as the ones who are actually the ones in danger. And that is to really come up with ideas on how to live with this new system of distance and so on. Because if we wait that everything goes back to normal, or to some new normal, or whatever we want to call it, I think that will be not very convincing, and we will not be very happy. Yeah, I think we all have to come up with that response to this challenge. I mean, what does it really mean? Yeah, is it for the rest of our lives that we are not going to shops anymore? We just pick stuff up in front of restaurants, or it's like how can we design for that? Yeah.
What will be the future role of our streets? What will be the new forms of human transportation?
Are we giving up mobility and just doing everything through our screens? I don't think so. Of course, everybody says, yeah, I'm not going to get on a train anymore. It was my first thought as well. Well, as you know, I've spent most of my life in Europe. We are using trains a lot more. Buses, metros, things like that. I know that's a great system. It cannot be that we are just giving this up. I mean, really not. Yeah. It can also not be that you need masses of people constantly cleaning these trains and buses. Of course, I mean, that should be the norm anyways, but I don't think the new normal is going to be we're all sitting in our cars, all sitting in our houses, and that's it. It's just too grim. We can't do that. Yeah, we need to be a lot more optimistic, but we have to come up with it ourselves. I'm definitely approaching this with hope. Yeah, that I can tell you, because I think that it wasn't working for a long time already. So we know that. I mean, just this morning, my friend was again mentioning that they've been for decades now planning this wildlife corridor over the 405 here in Los Angeles, and I mean, in the meantime, they have enlarged the 405 before they actually did this wildlife bridge that should cover it up. So that's kind of absurd that our mobility always comes first, and we have so many problems with mobility, with transport. I mean, everybody is lamenting about having to drive so much. All of a sudden, the streets are pretty empty. People are getting their bikes out, or they're even buying bikes. A friend of mine in Boston said it's impossible to find a bike. I think since we humans are also pretty flexible. We should absolutely adapt to this. Yeah, there are, you know, okay, of course, LA is a very widespread city. It's probably not that on your first day on a bike, you're going all the way to the ocean on a bike and something like that. But still, you know, just because there are a couple of hills, it doesn't mean that you can't make it. Yeah. And it's a great recreational thing. And it's just one of many things. Yeah. In other cities, I mean, in London, people are walking to work for 2 hours. Yeah. I mean, it's just because they want to. Yeah. And they even sort of lengthen the way to work because they want to go through this park and through that park and through that park and things like that. Yeah. And how nice it is actually to do something like that. Yeah. So then the next question is, will you still have a place where you have to go to for work? Because right now most offices are shut as well. So all this is sort of an adaptation, but definitely we need mobility to get to certain places, to run errands, even though also that is sort of reduced because we can also order a lot and have it brought to our homes. This also, I don't know exactly how, I mean, it's like, how could I? It's not my profession, but not even people who are really mobility specialists have a complete clue, but they have a lot of suggestions, and I think we need to listen to all of them. Because it'll give us one really important thing. It'll give us time, but actually, and it'll give us also much better air. Yeah, everybody who's been living in LA for a long time says that the air now is so much better. And that is the same for every city, I guess. And when I go for a walk, I tend to walk in the middle of the road because I feel totally safe. You know, I mean, it's like you know, there's so few cars. I mean, I don't do that on the main roads, but like in my neighborhood, I'm just walking in the middle of the road, and then zigzagging a little bit from one side to another, and you get a completely other perspective on things. You know, you look at houses in your neighborhood, and you know, so sort of like you're not so close to them, you see them in a different way. And you look at everything from a different perspective when you have more space. Yeah. And it just is a really great experience to have this possibility to walk not only on a slim sidewalk or a small trail in the park or something like that, but to have that space. Yeah. And it is space. When I grew up, when I was a kid, we were always playing in the streets. I mean, it was not a busy street, so we could do that. We were painting in the streets and stuff like that. And I think it's a great potential. But okay, of course, we can't do that with all the streets, that's for sure. But just as an example, I mean, the city of London already 20 years ago at least, maybe even more, let's say 20 years ago, started this initiative of the congestion charge, where they said, okay, private people, if they want to come into London from outside, if they aren't residents, sort of coming from the peripheries, and that was quite steep. They had to pay something like £10 to just get in. And so you started thinking about it. I mean, £10 was something like $15, yeah. And so people started thinking about it. Then they put big parking structures on this ring road. And people started using public transport a lot more, and public transport became also better. And I mean, London public transport in general is very good. But it did change the whole image of the city. There was less noise, much better air, and it was just a different way. And this is exactly when people started walking to work and using bikes much more. And at the time I was working there, and you know, all of a sudden people were on bikes, and it was a bit scary because they're driving on the other side. So I wasn't really used to this whole thing anyway. So I waited a little bit with getting on a bike again, but then it was really amazing. Yeah. And for many people, it was the first time to do that. Then there are other places where people are actually really just, for them, it's the most normal thing in the world to ride a bike to work. Yeah. It's not, okay, and in some places it's probably too hot or too rainy or something like that. But I don't think that's the problem. It's just one more alternative to find other ways of getting to and from places. Yeah. And if we could do that, then we could probably run bus lanes on the streets only, bus and delivery lanes, and have one lane maybe for car traffic. But we could reduce all that quite easily, actually, because the surface probably stays, but you just zone it in a different way and have more public transport, and so on, huge bike lanes, pedestrian walkways that are big and wide, and so on and so on. I'm always saying that LA is really the sort of testing ground for everything urban, extreme urban. Yeah, I mean, so many things have been tried here for the first time. The people here that have lived here for a long time, they always look at me and they're like, yeah, really? Is that good? Is that bad? I think, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a fact. Yeah, I mean, all of us who have been educated in architecture have quite early in our education heard about Los Angeles, because it's a city of sprawl. It's a city of beautiful freeway junctions. I mean, let's really say they're beautiful. Yeah, they're sculptures. There were people involved that really took care of them looking good. Rainer Benham was so smart to point that out in his book, In the Four Ecologies, and it really is true. Yeah, you know, these freeway junctions, also these overflies, passovers, and so on, giving you amazing views over the city and so on. You know, I cannot really say that this is all bad, not at all. You know, I cannot say that this is all bad, and I think having space is a fantastic thing. Yeah. So now here it is all spread out, but it doesn't really mean that everybody has to drive to work for 3 hours. Yeah. That is the thing that doesn't make sense. Yeah. The thing is, I think, much more an organizational thing. Yeah. That over the decades, many cities, not only Los Angeles, but most cities have developed in such a way that people are living far too far away from where they are working. And that is something that can be regulated. It is very often regulated, we know that. And that, I think, is a very interesting thing to study and to research. You know, what can actually be done on a policy level, what can be done as incentives that you work closer to your home, or actually what a lot of people are doing now, the working and living in the same place. Yeah. What are the next houses, single family houses, if something like that is really a solution in the future? That's very debatable, but you know, if it was, yeah, under the circumstances, all of a sudden people are sort of very happy to have their house and a little yard and stuff like that. Yeah. What will that house look like? How do we have to organize a plan so that we can work and live and all these kinds of things in one place? Yeah. If we can figure that out, yeah, if there are incentives for that, if governments are understanding these topics, yeah, and get away from zoning that really doesn't respond to our society anymore, I think then there's a great chance to find a much more interesting way of living, also a sprawled city like Los Angeles. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're doing all over the globe. Yeah, that's why I'm saying LA is a test city. It's also been an example, bad or good, whatever you want to call it, for many other places across the globe. You know, when you really look at the definition of density, then it's not what we want. No, nobody of us wants that. Yeah, but I think it's probably more a conversation about concentration of activities and functions and what we need in our daily lives. Yeah, so we have called it density. Yeah, in every language, pretty much, at least everyone that I came across, it's always translated as density, and I think it's much more about concentration, complexity. And then it becomes a little bit more positive, because then you realize that, you know, in concentration and in a concentrated urban situation, you know that there are a lot of things that you want. Yeah, there's the vicinity to all kinds of offerings, from supplies to friends to and so on and so on, you know. And I would exclude all, I would also absolutely include always, and this is what one should expect also from a good density proposal or densification proposal, if you will, that there is exactly also that part that is there for recreational space, for just, you know, having some break. Yeah. But I want to come back to what I said at the beginning. Yeah. So the thing is, we cannot only measure this in square meters, square feet, or something like that. For me, it is really so much more about you know, having access to good air, and having maybe also a view or a light, things like that. Yeah, that, you know, you can probably be in a quite dense situation. And for example, I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with Tokyo. I'm also only semi-familiar with it. It's been a long time that I've been there, but I was really impressed by how dense and complex the city is. And on the other hand, how much privacy it also gives you. So I think it's also about that, yeah, that you have not in front of your window, just the window of somebody else, something like that, yeah. That you have maybe the view at least at some bit of sky or something like that. LA has an extreme potential here because of its topography, yeah. That not only in the hills can you go up and down, and we know that that is also all socially sort of structured, but even in the basin, you have, actually, when you really look at the topography of the LA basin, there are sort of these soft waves of the plateau, and there are areas that are a little bit higher and less higher and lower and so on. And you just, from some areas, all of a sudden you're surprised and you have a great view. Yeah? And that is liberating, if you like it or not. It's probably not the view of your living room, that'd be fantastic, or your terrace or something like that. But it is the view when you step out of your house or something. Yeah? And these things, they are important. Yeah, that is quality. That is I think where one's got to be very, very important when one does these proposals for and also quantifications for how much housing do I get here, how much housing do I get there. You know, what is this the tower thing, or is this the sort of 2-3 floor high housing structure or something like that? I mean, it's got to be, you've got to start somewhere, yes, but then you've really got to check other factors that come from other disciplines, the flow of air, the light, all these kinds of things. Yeah.
What should be the role of technology and artificial intelligence in rethinking the possibilities for public space? Can AI be used to control parts of the city according to unexpected events?
You know, okay, so I have to probably take a little, do a little curve, or it's a bigger curve or something like that. As you know, I grew up in Germany. I grew up in West Germany when the city was still divided, when the country was still divided. Obviously, we were aware what was going on the other side, and East Germany was of all the Eastern Bloc definitely the country that was the most surveyed and controlled and so on. That was a time when there was no technology that did that. It was people. I'll give you an example. When I actually moved to Berlin in the early 1990s, just after the fall of the wall, I rented an apartment in the eastern part of town. And most people well, it was sort of like half occupied. That the building had 12 apartments, typical Berlin block situation. And half of the apartments at that time were already occupied by sort of new residents, some also international, but definitely more from Western Germany and so on, students and so on. I was a student at the time. And the other half was still Eastern German residents who had lived in this building for a long, long time. And at the beginning, I wasn't really aware, but then I realized that there was always some shoveling in front of the door of my apartment when I was inside, or especially when I had friends over. And I had a double door, but I still heard it. So there was this kind of 1 square meter space between the 2 doors at the entrance to my apartment. I never really understood why there were these 2 doors. You know, when I had friends over and so on, we had conversations sitting in the kitchen that was just close to that door, to the entrance door to the apartment. So then eventually somebody said to me, "Oh, come on, Karen, are you naive? Of course they were listening in." And I was like, wait a minute, but those times are over. Yeah, I mean, by then it was like, 4 or 5 years into the sort of new world thing. And no, it wasn't over, because it was in the psyche of this woman, who was a very friendly lady, that she was by the East German state assigned for that building to take notes on everybody who was coming and leaving. And that was her life. And she just couldn't stop doing it. She had, of course, understood that there was a new world now, a new regime, a new everything, but she was still doing it. And I was speechless. I let her continue doing it because I knew there was no place where she would bring her notebook anymore. But so everybody in East Germany was spied on. And there were these archives, and then they were opened in the 90s, and people could go to this agency and read what people over the years had sort of written up about them. And some were completely devastated. Yeah. So that is sort of something that I've grown up with, and it's really pretty spooky. Now, generally, I have nothing to hide. So my attitude is, if somebody wants to spy on me and know what I'm doing, fine. I think I'm a pretty boring person for them. But of course, I'm aware that they can follow what I'm buying, what I'm saying, what political comments I make, or something like that. And that is, yeah, strange. That is why, there's always been this conversation about whether to regulate things more or less. I think at this moment we are living in a time that is really strange, because there is the dark web that is so much bigger than the web that we know. There are people who are saying the web that we know, the internet that we know, is 1/10 of what is out there, and the rest is the dark web. And only certain people have access to that. That I find really not so cool. Actually very unsettling. And so when I see that, then I really want, it's like, I can understand that, and I want that also, that with issues that we have right now, like the virus, like whatever other things, that there can be contact tracing, there can be all kinds of surveillance. And even, the stories that one hears from Korea, that there are sort of like robot dogs patrolling the roads. I don't really know. Cannot even imagine that, but okay, fine. If I meet a robot dog, that tells me then that I have to keep more distance to somebody else. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll give it a try. I have no idea what that means. But it still is, I just want to know where that information ends up. And I want to, when I say, okay, you know what, now, today, I am going to that place, to that server farm that is whatever, where, and I want that footage, then I want that footage. And somebody's going to tell me that that is really the footage that there is. And I don't know how we can create this. This trust, because right now we're really living in a time where we do not trust anybody. The past days have shown that. We don't trust our security forces anymore. We don't trust anything anymore. So it's a bad time. And but I do have, I really do have hope and optimism that we can build that. And that is, and I want that also, because I've seen, also in medical research and things like that, what people can do when they have access to information from, other patients that have had very serious illnesses and so on. Because anyways, I mean, with my example that I've given you from the early 90s in Berlin, they've always been keeping track. Yeah. I mean, it's just, but if technology makes it easier, helps us to grow, then I would give it a try. I just really want to know where it ends up. Yeah. So I think we have to crack this thing about this dark web and whatever it is, because, nobody can really explain it to you. Like questions like election meddling is so abstract for me. I don't understand how it is possible. And we need people who can explain that in normal terms so that society can trust again. And I think then when we can do that, then we have really created something. Sounds probably extremely idealistic or almost, I don't know what. but that is my very personal approach here. And I think we have definitely the intelligence to do that. This is really coming from this one experience that I've had myself, and I've seen people lining up in front of the agency in Berlin, filing their requests to see their files and so on. And, it was years and years and years of people shoveling through these archives. And wow, yeah, I know people who did that, who grew up in the East and went to see whether there was anything. And sometimes it's just, okay, plays the piano too loud and so and so. And sometimes there was also misinformation. So that was analog. That was when you could just say, okay, so here's the building full of paper. Today, this is so much more abstract, yeah. We don't even know where the next server farms are being built anymore, yeah. 10 years ago, we still knew they were somewhere in the whatever, in a rural area in Wyoming and so and so and this and that. And now we don't know. I mean, it's probably a little bit like the subprime crisis 10 years ago, that people are even buying our information. Most likely that is what is happening anyways, that people are buying the data and for even know. So that has to be solved. And I think, I do believe it can be solved. I think this is again a thing that we know much too little about. Yeah. And that's not okay. I want to know where my fingerprints are ending up when I come into the country and they fingerprint me. I mean, every day I'm starting my phone, fingerprint. It's like, where's all that stuff ending up? Really? Is it just in my phone? I don't know. So we're at that point. Because otherwise, we're running around town and touching a door handle and so on. And that's my fingerprint. And now what? Yeah, she's been to that and that store 5 times over the past week. I don't know. That's also urban scale, by the way. That's the urban detail.